5 years ago, at the start of what would soon become a global pandemic, I took a risk and moved from a small front yard garden I had in urban San Diego and purchased this property behind me. But it didn't look like this. It was pretty much a barren lot that I've transformed over the last 5 years into a thriving urban homestead. And in this video, I'm gonna take you through every single section of the front, the backyard, and even some of the rain capture systems I've put on this property and show you what I did from start to finish. If you're new to the channel, what's up? My name is Kevin. I've been growing my own food for over 12 years. A lot of you, when you see me out in the wild, you call me Eric, and it pains me inside, but it's okay. I'll let you keep calling me Eric as long as I convince you that you should start some kind of garden in your life. So let's kick it off here in the raised bed garden. This is the first thing that I did when I bought this property. 5 years ago, there was nothing here. It was just wood chips on the ground, no pathways, no beds, no beautiful rose arch, nothing. So what I had to do was bring in some kind of container to grow in. The reason I like growing in containers or raised beds as opposed to getting started in the ground, which would be technically cheaper when you're a beginner, is because these you get to fill with whatever soil mix you want, which means you can fill it with something that is guaranteed to grow good plants. Back in the day, when I grew in the ground, when I first started, I was growing in really heavy clay soil. It was tight. It didn't really give the plants much in the way of air to breathe, and the water kind of stuck there, and my plants were having a really hard time. Setting up a raised bed garden was the very first thing I did, and I spaced them out in a way where I could actually walk through them. So a good rule of thumb when you're getting a raised bed garden started is give about 30 inches between beds, maybe 36 if you want. That means that you can walk through, you can bring a wheelbarrow through, and I located it right up here in my front yard garden. First of all, because I think the containers look pretty aesthetic. These metal containers, Epic raised beds, you can grab them at our shop.epicgardening.com, but that's besides the point. So what I did is I got some really tall ones and I filled them up with soil. In fact, to save a little bit of money, I threw logs in the bottom of these when I first started gardening because I wanted to save a little bit on that soil cost. And then I used higher quality soil for that top half of the bed right here. So the top 15 inches, I used good soil. The bottom I filled with logs or wood chips or sticks or twigs just for some fill material. And then over the years, I've amended this soil with compost or extra soil over time. And now, as you can tell, these are growing in a really, really productive fashion. So up here is where a lot of my annual vegetables are, or my flowers. So I have some alyssum here and some nasturtiums. This is a root crop bed. I've got some lettuce, cabbage, potatoes, onions, garlic. All of that is sitting right up here in my front yard raised bed garden. Consider this, on my property at least, kind of the aesthetic side of the garden. It's pretty palatable for your neighbors if they are a little bit annoyed by stuff like this sometimes. A lot of the times HOAs are even accepting of this type of design. So this is really what many of you watching might have as your only garden, and that's perfectly fine. So this is the raised bed garden, but let's head on over here to the orchard. So like I mentioned, back there in the raised beds, that's a lot of the annual vegetables, the things that you grow once, maybe twice a season, you eat them, and then you're done for the season, you wait till the next season. Then you have stuff like this. I was very fortunate that this tree actually was on the property. It was the only real fruit tree on the property. It's a somewhat less common one called a loquat. The best way I could describe it is kind of like a tropical peach, very tasty, perfectly ripe right now actually, and as you can tell, very prolific. To me, one of the most fun parts about building an urban or suburban style homestead is growing stuff that produces for you year after year. I've been on this property for 5 years. There's more loquat here than I can eat, and there's also more loquat than I can even give away to family and friends. The birds even try their best, and they can't get enough of them. So I've got a loquat, but I also have a fig tree that I planted right over here. This fig tree, as well as all of the fruit trees that I've purposefully planted right over here, are designed to give me a repeatable harvest year after year, as well as looking nice and aesthetic as something like this can look. But to me, I think this looks quite nice. So as we come down the row here, what I've done is I've planted my fruit trees very close together. Right here, I have 2 pomegranates. There's a papaya behind me. And then this entire row here is about 15 different types of citrus plants. Even if you haven't grown fruit trees, you might be thinking, I think I've seen fruit trees grow. I'm pretty sure they're spaced out a lot wider than you're spacing them out, Kevin. And that is actually true. So what you have to think about is in an urban or suburban environment, you're limited on space almost above anything else right here there's a citrus. Right here, there's a citrus. Right here, there's a citrus. Right across from me, there's a pomegranate. These are very close together. What you have to do is you have to make sure that you are pruning these plants very aggressively. Do something called summer pruning. Most of the time when people grow fruit trees, they're not pruning them in the summer because that's when a lot of them are actually producing fruit. But what you have to remember in a backyard garden or even a front yard is that I don't really want 700 limes. I want 50, 70, 100 limes per season. I'm okay with that plant being smaller than it genetically should be, because this plant really could go 10, 15 feet tall. And instead of letting the plant express to that level, you do some summer pruning, you plant them closer together, and you accept that you're gonna get less fruit per tree, but you're gonna get more varieties of fruit in your backyard or front yard orchard. And then what I've also done is made a chart of the times that all these citrus, my peaches, my plums, my apples, my pomegranates all ripen up, and made sure that in every month of the year, I have something coming ready to harvest. So in January and February, some of my citrus are ready. In July, June, some of my peaches are ready. My pomegranates start getting ready in late summer, early fall. So anytime I come out in this garden in a pretty compact space, I have something to eat and harvest. And then something I've also done, and we'll get to the water systems in a second, is all of this is irrigated not only by drip irrigation that I've installed on the property, but also by what's called a gray water system. So in my backyard, I put an outdoor shower in, and instead of plumbing all that water directly to the wastewater system here in San Diego, California, I routed it out to this trench right here. We dug some piping in, and it just floods this area. And as you can tell, these plants are loving it. The only thing I had to sacrifice is that I have to shower outdoors, which I don't mind at all. In fact, I absolutely love it. And I changed the soap that I use to being Dr. Bronner's Castile style soap, which again, not a huge sacrifice on my part to get all of this fruit. So now I have annual vegetables. I've got fruit trees producing year after year. What's next? It's time to get into perennial vegetables. These are artichokes. I also have some other stuff sprinkled around here, some flowers. I drilled in some potatoes actually that are sprouting over here. But this area is designed to give me something to eat, something to look at, and also something I don't have to plant year after year. So things like artichoke or asparagus or sunchoke, there's a lot of different vegetables that provide some pretty cool look. I don't know, to me this kind of looks like a little prehistoric, Jurassic Park kind of vibes. Then of course I have these beautiful artichoke heads that I could harvest and eat if I want, or I could let these flower and these will become these beautiful sort of purple flowers. Now, the thing to think about with these homestead designs, at least something that I prefer, is to have it be as self-sustaining as possible. So there's two ways that I've done that in this section. You can't see it, but there's a little pipe at the back right here that actually pipes laundry water out to this system. Now, again, you do have to change the detergent. I use something called Oasis. That makes it so that it's biodegradable and it's safe. But I'm eating artichoke, so the plant's gonna really be filtering a lot of that stuff out. It's not like I'm eating lettuce where I'm actually eating the leaves themselves. I'm eating this unopened flower, so it's fine to use laundry water there. And it looks absolutely amazing. I don't have to water this with city tap at all. The other thing I've done, and you'll see this throughout the property, is put in rainwater capture. I don't get a lot of rain in my climate. And when you're planning something like this out, you think, what do I have in abundance? Well, I have sunlight in abundance, but I don't have rain in abundance. So when I get it, I wanna make sure that I keep it. So what I have here is a system that takes water from this little tile roof. It takes water into the gutter here, throws it into this filter system. So what you see is something called a leaf filter up the top. That's that big piece right there. What that does is it filters out the big particles. Then I have this vertical column that's called the first flush filter. When it hasn't rained for a while, maybe some bird poop or some debris forms on the roof, all that initial dirty water fills up that vertical pipe. It'll overflow into this system with cleaner water. That's gonna capture that. This pipe right here says, hey, what do I do if I actually overflow this? I get too much rain. This will overflow right into my artichoke patch. So it's gonna supplement my laundry system over here. And of course, there's a spigot at the bottom with a hose so I can direct that water to wherever I want. And this is a 250 gallon cistern. One of the things I really promote here at Epic Gardening is growing what excites you, growing what you like, even if it's a little bit weird. And weird is what I'm growing right here. This is something called a dragon fruit plant. It's a tropical cactus that produces a fruit that most people think is bland. I personally disagree. I think you've got to eat it fresh, nice and chilled, right out of the refrigerator after you harvest it, and it's absolutely delicious. But I have 6 different dragon fruit here on custom trellises that I've built using some of our raised bed corners here. This is a product that we just launched, but it's just a nice way to kind of separate it from the ground, put a trellis up, and this kind of illustrates adapting to plants the way they want to grow. You don't grow plants. Plants grow themselves. You give them an environment in which they grow themselves optimally, right? So this is a plant that in its native environment likes to climb. So I give it something to climb. You can see these little aerial roots here. That's what's kind of making it go up. And I'm also tying around to make sure that they don't fall under the support of their own weight. And then they like to fall down and they produce these little offshoots and they'll produce flowers. And this is just one of those things that I think makes the space look really unique. It gives it some character. It's nice and sort of even, which is something I really like in my garden designs. And it also produces a ton of fruit. Come September, October, there's going to be about a few dozen of these delicious dragon fruit. So we're hanging out here in my outdoor shower, which is kind of see-through. So sometimes my neighbors might get a little bit of a sneak peek that they weren't expecting. But the way that this works is pretty simple. It's plumbed up, standard, like straight from my city tap. And what it does is it's got this kind of overhead shower that goes straight down into a drain here that goes all the way out to that orchard that I mentioned. Actually, my indoor shower is connected to the same piping system. So I have a little switch on my cabinet inside of my house where I can switch that shower and it can go to the city just to waste water. And if I flip the switch, there's an actuator underneath my house that turns the pipe and it'll route it to that citrus and fruit orchard that I mentioned out there. The question I get all the time when I talk about I only shower outdoors, my shower waters my garden, everyone says that's gross. You're going to get all sorts of weird particulate matters in that citrus orchard. And the truth is it's really not the case. All I have to do, like I mentioned, is switch my soap to this right here. This is a dispenser. It puts out this Dr. Bronner's Castile style soap. I can use whatever fragrance that I want. I think I just use unscented right now. Yep. And I'm good to go. And it's actually quite cheap. I don't have any other fancy shower products that I use. I don't even use shampoo for my hair. I just put a little Dr. Bronner's in every now and then, maybe once every week or so, and then I let it go back. So my life becomes a lot simpler because I have one soap to use and I get to shower out here in the morning or in the evening. It's actually really peaceful and probably one of the better parts of my day sometimes. So as we enter the gardening section of my backyard, you can see I've put trees pretty much anywhere I can get away with them. Similar setup to the trees in the front yard, but these ones actually have what's called a tree surround around them just to delineate them a little bit, give them a little bit of definition. I've got something called an ice cream bean here, which is an edible sort of large pod that's very tasty, kind of tastes like marshmallow a bit. Had my first harvest of that this year, absolutely delicious. These 2 trees right here are something called a jujube. It tastes kind of like an apple, but it's a little bit smaller and has a bit of a chew to it, especially if you dehydrate it, which is my favorite way to eat the jujube. But I have 2 different varieties of jujube here. The reason, again, that I would have 2 is because these have different harvesting windows. So when this one's going, this one's not. When this one's going, this one's not. Again, it gives me a more consistent harvest over the course of the year, which is what I want as an urban homesteader or someone who wants to grow a lot of different varieties of food on one property. Now, as we come around here, it starts to get pretty extra, I'll say. I fully am aware that since we do this for a living here at Epic Gardening, I have gone way overboard compared to what most people would do, but it's all in an effort to kind of express what you could do in a normal suburban home. This house is less than 1,000 square feet indoor living space, guys. It's actually a pretty small house, especially for San Diego, California. So what I have here is the big cistern. This is where all of the rainwater off of my roof is captured. It's routed from my roof underneath the soil here, and it actually comes in up here, which is kind of counterintuitive. You say, how's the water flowing upwards with no sort of pump system? Well, it's because over at my house, the entry point of all that water coming off the roof is about here. And as you know, water will find its own level. So if the entry point is right about here, a couple feet higher, it naturally will force water up this pipe and into this cistern. And there's an overflow in case it overflows. But this is a 5,000 gallon cistern, so we don't run into that too often here in San Diego, California. Now, I'm a little embarrassed to show it to you right now because this is barren. What used to be here is a passion fruit vine. In fact, it was so crazy that it took over this entire space. So we had to unfortunately reset it and plant another passion fruit just because it just went too crazy. I couldn't handle it. But this is another example of mixed use or multi-purpose strategies, especially in small spaces. You have to be thinking about this. So I have some sort of structure that's providing a purpose. I'm using my rainwater. I actually have a pressure sensitive pump down here that I can use if I actually wanna grab a hose and start watering, but I need to keep this cool. And I also have a bit of a structure now that, I don't know, it looks okay. I wouldn't say it looks amazing. So we put some vinyl wrapped wire with some T-posts and some twine here, and we planted a passion fruit. That's gonna give some shade to the actual cistern. That's gonna give some beauty to the garden because my eye is now gonna stop on a nice lush vine instead of this big sort of hunk of plastic. And passion fruit, I don't know if you've checked the stores recently, is about $2.99 to $4.99 for a single fruit. This produced hundreds over the course of the season, especially once it's established. So that's really 3 uses in one for this space. Now, let's take a look up here, which is where my pond is. And this is what I mean by going a little extra, going a little epic. Of course, a backyard pond is a pretty expensive thing to put in. But what I wanted to do was capture even more rain. Of course, anything falling on the surface of the pond is going to be captured in the pond system. And then over here where you see the chaises, you see a little bit of a flagstone patio over there. That's actually an underground capture system. There's 1,500 gallons of potential to capture water under there. There's a big sort of trench dugout and it's lined with a pond liner. So when water falls even over there, it's going to be captured in the system. So I've got water here, got water in the front, I got water in the pond, water underground. And as you'll see in a bit, there's actually another cistern over there where my chicken coop is. But the whole reason for this pond is it gives me the ability to have fish. So I've got some koi in here. I also have some mosquito eating fish that help cut down on mosquitoes across my entire property. Because of course, the mosquitoes are gonna come here to lay their eggs, and then the mosquito eating fish are gonna eat the mosquitoes and the eggs, and that's gonna cut down on their population. But it also allowed me to access aquatic plants. So I've got my water lilies, I have my sort of riparian zone style plantings here. I have some native sages that bring in a lot of beneficial insects and bugs and stuff like that. But I even have some edibles. So if I walk across my pond, all of this that you see right over here, this is actually edible watercress. And I started this a couple years ago, and it just continually resows itself over the course of the year. So sometimes it'll be here, it'll get a little crazy, we'll rip some of it out, and sometimes we'll rip it out, clean it up, and we'll actually make like watercress soup with it, which is one of my favorite soups. And of course, as you have, a space to enjoy, you want to be sitting here and pondering your life and wondering why you've decided to become the plant daddy on YouTube. And if that was a smart life choice for you, you sit here at the pond and you wonder that. I mean this very seriously. Without Shopify, you probably wouldn't be watching this video, and I may not even have this home. And the reason why is simple. Shopify is a commerce platform. It's tools for entrepreneurs to help you run your business more effectively, let you do the things that are absolutely the most important, like getting out here in the garden and testing some of these experiments for you guys and making videos, or coming up with awesome new products to offer you guys to help you improve your garden instead of dealing with shipping rules, sales tax, all sorts of different back-end systems that Shopify helps with. For us, it's absolutely invaluable. It's the most important piece of software that we use at Epic Gardening, as well as our seed company, Botanical Interests, which we acquired a couple years ago. The first thing that I did when we acquired Botanical Interests was get them off of a very old commerce platform and upgrade them to Shopify. And immediately we were able to do a better job for our customers because it was just easier to run the business. So that's the best way to think about it. Whether you're running an on or offline business, you have products or services, you're just starting or you're scaling up, Shopify is the thing that you need to add to the business. You can get a free trial at shopify.com/epic gardening. And now let's get back to the tour. So like I said, this is the test garden where we're running all sorts of different experiments. We can run about 16 at a time, and they take a while to do. So this potato one we've been working on for about 3 or 4 months now. We have a garlic one that's gonna take about 6 months perhaps. And I've got some fruit trees and different little things sprinkled around here, just trying to maximize my space. Even a mushroom bed that we recently harvested some mushrooms off of. So not just growing plants here at the homestead. I would say if there was a central hub or kind of a heart and soul of this property, it is probably this greenhouse right here. So let's come inside and I'll show you what we do. So here we are. It's a little bit hot in here because of course it's a greenhouse, but this is where a lot of the seed starting happens here on the property. As a grower, when I first started, I was buying starts from a nursery, just plants that were ready to go in the ground. But as you develop as a gardener, you really want to start your own seeds. So we have all these different trays of different crops. I've got some beans right here, tons of flowers here. There's some peppers, tomatoes, and some onions and such back here. And these are all things that I'm starting right now to get in the garden. The reason I have it in a greenhouse is because this stuff typically likes it to be a little bit warmer. The soil temperature's a little bit warmer to germinate those seeds and get them growing. And they just respond a little bit better in a greenhouse. And we're running all sorts of interesting experiments in here as well. I'm growing a tomato upside down in a bucket. I'm trying to see how big of a basil bush I can make. I even have the vanilla bean orchid as well as some other tropical plants in here because the climate in here can actually support it. Even in my climate in San Diego, California, I can't be growing vanilla orchid outside. I need to give it a little bit more humidity. Now, of course, this is a pretty fancy thing, but you can mimic this for about 50 bucks off of Amazon by buying like a simple little greenhouse skeleton with some cover, and you have a pretty good system, or just using a shelving unit with some lamps you got at Home Depot, or even a windowsill just to boost the light, the warmth a little bit to get a lot of stuff growing. So what I like to do in here is grow some of those more rare crops, as well as come in and water all my seedlings. And the way I do it, typically at least, is you've got these trays. So these are 10-20 bottom trays, 10 inches by 20 inches. I just fill the bottom up like that. And then because of the way that we designed our trays here, these are our 4 cells, they've got these holes at the bottom. So they just wick the water straight up here. So watering, you might think, oh, it's gonna take so much effort to water all these seedlings. It really doesn't. All you need to do is come in, remove one, fill this up for 4, 5, 6 seconds, and then put it back on. And it's going to wick all that water up. And of course, when it comes time to take these out into the garden and transplant them, we have these little holes at the bottom. So you can just press that, comes right out. Nice healthy root system, didn't disturb it at all. And I can get this straight into the garden. And speaking of, let's head out to the in-ground garden. So 5 years ago, when I moved in, the backyard looked even worse than the front yard. They didn't even do the courtesy of throwing some wood chips on the ground. It was just a bunch of weeds and very light clay soil, like a light looking, almost like it was like Martian soil or something like that. Very, very hard to get into. So what I had to do here was something that you typically don't see a lot of gardeners recommend, and it's doing something called tilling or rototilling the soil. I rented a machine called a rototiller, which has these tines that break soil up, and I ran it over this area for, I would say, just a season, and put a bunch of compost on the surface and kind of worked it into the soil to see if I could loosen the soil, make it easier to plant in, but also work a little bit of fertility or organic matter fertilizer into the soil because it had been neglected for so long. It was pretty much only good for growing weeds. That has obviously worked. I only did it one time. This has been through a lot of different designs over the years. Right now, it's effectively 4 big triangles. So there's a big triangle of potatoes here. There's flowers and beets there. There's onions and garlic there. And we got some dill, chard, and some other flowers right here. But this changes over the course of the season. When these potatoes come ready to harvest in about a month or so, it's probably gonna be peppers right here. When the beets come out, it's probably gonna be tomatoes right there. And all I really do is cycle. I like to grow in the ground because it's a little bit more natural feeling to me. It feels very homey. I really like the look of it. I like the aesthetic, and I can also get away with planting crops in much larger amounts. So for example, there's about 30 different potatoes in this little bed right here. If I was doing that in a raised bed, I'd probably have to use 2 or 3 beds. And in this area, potatoes are so easy to grow that I just pop them in the ground, and I'm gonna probably get 100, 150 pounds of potatoes out of this right here. Again, similarly, for crops that take a long time to grow, and I use a lot of, I like growing in ground. This is onions, and there's about a 35 to 50 foot row of 2 actual rows of onions. And you can see we got them bulbing up really nicely. I like to call it nature's refrigerator. I can leave them in as long as I want. barring of course they actually get overgrown. But for sometimes I can just leave them here and then come out and harvest them as I need them. And then when they do finally get time to harvest completely, I'll pull them all out, dry them, store them, and cure them in the pantry inside my house. But you can see in ground, it gives you the opportunity to plant in much longer ways, so you can manage that space a lot easier. I know this is all onions. I can come through, weed things out easily, no problem. And then over in a system like this, I have pretty much just 4x4s. 4x4s we rammed into the ground. We didn't do any concrete or anything like that. What this does is it grows peas right now on this netting, but if I want to take the netting off and throw some string lines down, I could grow tomatoes on this. If I wanted to grow squash, I could grow netting and clips to help the squash kind of stay supported. I can even grow something like melons. So systems like this allow for a lot of flexibility in your garden. It's just a beautiful thing to see. So here I have the shed. This is actually the first thing that I put on the property 5 years ago, and it's gone through a couple different changes, but this is the tool hub of the homestead. And what I've recently done is add solar to the top of it and an off-grid battery. So this shed is completely off-grid. I've got lights that run at night and of course indoors right now because it gets kind of dark, and I have plans to add a fan in there for ventilation, as well as maybe a little workstation with some power tools or something like that. But this is kind of just where all the tools go so that the garden can look beautiful and not like it's a complete mess with tools everywhere. The next big thing that happened was the chicken coop. And I had never kept animals before. I had dogs as a kid and a little fish once, and also those like grower frogs that you put in a little tub. Those guys lived for like 20 years. I don't know. My mom was still taking care of them when I was in college, and then they died, and she texted me and she was crying about it. Rest in peace, you know. But here we have my chickens, and my chickens of course are producing eggs, like more eggs than I can eat right now. And as you know, eggs go into shortage sometimes. Earlier, even this year, eggs were in a massive shortage. No one could find them. I was sitting here eating eggs, no problem. In fact, I had so many I gave them to family and friends. So the chickens on a homestead system, even in an urban environment, provide kind of 3 benefits. Of course, you have the eggs, but then you have the ability to take any sort of scrap from the garden, like this right here. Let's see, Wednesday's probably really going to enjoy that. Oh, there you go. So they're eating that, and they're going to make use of those garden scraps. Let's say you're harvesting your chard, you got too much chard, and you're going to use some of it, but you're not going to use all of it, but you already pulled it out of the ground. We'll give the rest to the chickens. So they're going to use that material and they're going to convert it into fertilizer and eggs, right? The fertilizer is their poop. Their poop actually ends up, most of it at least, in the hen house over here. So this is the outdoor run. This is where they get to come out and play in the daytime. Indoor run, if they get a little scared or they want to cool off, they go in the indoor run. Right up here, this is the hen house. This is where they sleep at night, and this is mostly where they do their business, right? They lay their eggs, which are right here. See if we have any. We do. We actually have quite a few. So I'm getting about 6 of these guys every single day right now. And they also leave all their chicken manure in there. So what you end up doing is you scoop out the chicken manure from the bedding. That bedding is usually maybe wood chips or hemp. That's a carbon-rich material. And the manure is a nitrogen-rich material, which is the perfect segue to the composting system. So what ends up happening is all the waste, whether it's from the kitchen, the garden, or the chickens, ends up in this bin right here. So this is the hot composting system. There's actually 5 bins, and it kind of goes in a progression. So the least broken down stuff, as you can tell, we have some nasturtium vines right here, goes right here. As it breaks down, again, it gets a little bit darker, a little bit smaller, and then it keeps breaking down, and eventually you get to use that back in the garden. Like I mentioned, when I first improved all this soil back here, I had to put a lot of what on it? Compost. Now I make my own compost. Back then I had to buy the compost because I quite frankly did not have anywhere near enough to cover this area and till it all into the ground. And so as you can see, there's a lot you can do on a small space, and I am fully aware that all this stuff is at the higher level of the budget range, but there's ways to scale this to either free, if you scavenge up materials and use your time on the weekends to build. In fact, Jacques on our team built an entire chicken coop for very, very low material cost. It just took him a little bit of time to design and build it, but he got it done and it looks absolutely amazing. You can grow in ground for a very low cost. You don't need the raised beds or the seed starting trays and all that kind of stuff. We provide it because we think it makes gardening a little bit easier and a little bit more accessible to those of you who didn't grow up doing it. Just like me, I did not grow up doing this and look at what I have here in my backyard right now. So if any of this interests you and you're a little curious, here's a complete beginner guide with my brother, who is not a professional gardener. You can check that out. Of course, you can shop at shop.epicgardening.com. Thanks to Shopify for sponsoring this video. And if you want to know exactly how I did this on my own property, I did release a book called Epic Homesteading that you can buy either on Amazon or in our store, just to follow along with my exact plan. So until next time, good luck in the garden and keep on growing.